The notorious politician Enoch Powell once wrote that all political careers end in failure, and I think that's very true. Well, he should know, he certainly did. But that could be applied to any job that's a high-up job, that's a job where you're in charge of things, because the higher up you get in any organisation, the larger the political element becomes. And I was about to find that out. Goodbye, goodbye, wipe the tear, baby dear, from your eye. Though it's hard to know, I know, I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir, old thing, cheerio, chin chin, now poo, toodle, ooh, goodbye. I'd been the director of the Kent Institute of Art and Design for 9 years, but in the 7th year I was told by some government auditors that my chair of governors was too long in the tooth and been in the job too long. In fact, he'd been chair of governors of one of the institutions that made up the Kent Institute of Art and Design, the Canterbury College of Art beforehand, and that was drawn to my attention, and they saw it as continuous, so they said it's a good practice to look for somebody else. I didn't have to do it, but I thought, well, okay, he'd been very loyal to me, he'd been excellent in supporting the institution for years. But nevertheless, I had to sort of, I took what they said seriously, and with some difficulty I found another chair of governors, a new one. Big mistake. This guy came in, and it wasn't long before he was in the pocket of a new Vice-Chancellor who was very politically aggressive at the University of Kent. And I found that the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Kent would wine and dine my new chair of governors without me knowing about it, with the purpose of trying to take us over. And something the University of Kent had been trying to do ever since I'd been there, and probably before, because they wanted the sexiness of the Kent Institute of Art and Design, they wanted our overseas student income we got, and also our overseas student contacts, particularly in the Far East, which they didn't have. And so we were a very juicy sort of morsel for them, and I'd kept them at arm's length, but it was almost impossible to do it once my boss, the chair of governors, my new chair of governors, was always sort of singing from their hymn sheet and coming up with all sorts of things. And I had a year of fighting this off, and I think that's when my hair went the colour it has done. But towards the end of the year, there was some thing on the horizon that sort of would save the institution and let it remain as a specialist art and design institution and not just be a faculty or department of a university. I knew that what could happen there at Wolverhampton, where you were constantly fighting off departments that basically were departments that recruited students rather than selected them, as the art and design school did. And I didn't want that to be exported to Kent. But this new chap was a nuisance. But the new idea was that came about because the government had changed the rules on what constituted a university. And they said that you could have a specialist university, which it seems like a contradiction in terms, because a university is usually universal. It's got lots of different subjects and departments and so on. But they said, oh, well, you can have an art and design university or a law university or a medical university or whatever. But you needed at least 6,000 students, degree students, to do that, and I had only 3. But the Sony Institute of Art and Design, which is very similar, had another 3, so I rang up my opposite number there, and I put the idea to her that we could join together, because I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm quite a bit older than her, and I thought, well, I'll want to retire soon, because I was over 60 then, and get back to my studio, my work. And maybe I'll stay for a couple of years once the university has been formed. Well, the university was formed eventually, and a lot under my direction, and I became chief executive and she became the rector, and we're going to do it for 2 years. But what happened then was that her chair of governors became the chair of governors of the whole institution. He was he ran a plant hire business, and he was quite a ruthless politician as well as a businessman. And he soon had my pathetic chair of governors, the new one, in his pocket. And so that led to my demise because he didn't want two sort of chief executives there, especially me, because I challenged him on things like, you know, he wanted a thing called a headquarters. We didn't really having an academic headquarters. One of the colleges had, the others are like sort of satellites, and I fought him on that because I didn't want the place run like a plant hire business. And but eventually he stitched me up, and I had to sign one of those non-disclosure agreements, or gagging orders, as they used to be called, which in those days was this was 2005. They were very popular. These were quite sort of normal. And of course, since then, because of the Harvey Weinstein thing and so on, they're completely discredited, and people hold their nose if they hear the word gagging order on somebody and want to know what the problem is. But in those days, nobody dared say anything, and I found myself out. But the good news was, quicker than I thought, and I couldn't say why, but the good news was I could get back to my studio, which I'd not neglected because I'd worked in it, but I hadn't been able to exhibit, hadn't had the time to promote myself in the art world for 9 years at least. So it meant that I could go back and become a full-time artist, because after all, that was more important really. Goodbye, goodbye, wipe the tear, baby dear, from your eye. Though it's hard to part, I know, I'll be tickled to death to go. Don't cry, don't sigh, there's a silver lining in the sky. Bonsoir.